So next year, Thorpe Park are opening a brand new Mack Rides hypercoaster called Hyperia, which is going to take all the records for the UK's tallest and fastest roller coaster, reaching a maximum height of over 236 feet and a maximum speed of over 80 miles an hour. And upon opening, it will obviously take all the records in the UK, taking the record from the big one at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, a record that took 30 years to break by the time this thing opens. And it's going to be absolutely mental. It's also going to be the first roller coaster in the UK over 200 feet since Stealth, which is also at Thorpe Park, which opened back in 2006. But what about, after Hyperia opens, what's the next hypercoaster in the UK? What park could this hypercoaster possibly be going to? Well, it's not as simple as, in this sort of video, it's not as simple as just picking a park saying the next hypercoaster could go here. Because in the UK, we're not like America where we get where the average theme park has a hypercoaster. I'm not even joking. In this country, we have by next year we'll have 3 coasters over 200 feet in total: Hyperia, Stealth, and the big one. Cedar Point in Ohio, USA, on its own has 5 coasters over 200 feet, and that's just one theme park. There are several other theme parks in America that have multiple coasters over 200 feet. Some even have coasters over 300 feet, and even some over 400 feet. It's absolutely mental. Obviously, we know that America is a much larger country and therefore probably a much bigger economy than the UK. The UK is tiny. We don't have as many theme parks as America does. So that's obviously making it a lot more difficult as to guessing where the next hypercoaster could go in the UK. And obviously, as we know, hypercoasters are not cheap to build at all. They're very expensive. I believe Hyperia is going to cost Thorpe Park £18 million to build. Obviously, much of that is going towards the actual manufacturing of the ride. There probably isn't going to be much theming on the attraction. But in terms of manufacturing the track and supports, bear in mind £18 million is the same price tag that Alton Towers had to pay to build the Smiler, which is only 72 feet tall. But obviously, a lot more theming probably went into the Smiler. Plus, the Smiler is much longer in track length than Hyperia. 14 inversions. It's probably twice the length of Hyperia, to be honest. But I'm going on a tandem about the Smiler again, and I need to talk about the next hypercoaster in the UK, or the next one over 200 feet. So obviously, one sort of park that could have influenced other theme parks to add other large-scale roller coasters, or just invest a lot more into the theme parks, is the London Resort. Obviously, if you know the whole story behind the London Resort, you don't need to tell me, but you don't need me to tell you it was an absolute disaster. But if you don't know, basically the London Resort was a theme park that was planned to open. Basically, originally it was originally announced in 2012. It was originally just called I think it was all themed around Paramount properties and films. Obviously it had a lot of intellectual properties in it and things like that. But it was originally scheduled to open in 2018. Originally, obviously without assuming that everything went smoothly, which it didn't, as we all know. Obviously they would spend several years just delaying it because of planning issues with the local council. The main problem that stopped it from getting built was an environmental issue, where basically there was a nest of rare spiders on the site where they planned to build it, in Kent, just next to the River Thames. And there was a nest of rare spiders living there, and they couldn't move it, or they couldn't touch it, so that basically they spent a lot of time sorting out the environmental issues, and as we all know, none of it worked. News of the whole project started to decline over the next sort of few years, and the most recent news we heard of it was a few months ago, where the company that was planning to build the London Resort actually went into administration. Obviously, that's pretty much confirming that the London Resort is not going to be happening. That's probably the final nail in the coffin, to be honest. The company that was planning the London Resort have to try and get themselves out of administration by, seeking another company to buy them. And at this rate, that doesn't look like it's going to be happening either. My whole point about this London Resort thing is that if it was built, it would have been an absolute, it would have changed the UK theme park industry forever. From what the plans and concept art showed, it would have been, on par with Disneyland and all Disney theme parks in terms of like in terms of like attractions and theming and just like immersive entertainment, it would have been amazing. And that one park on its own, if it got built, would have just sparked like a huge amount of competition for the other existing theme parks in the UK, even like places like Alton Towers, Thorpe Park, and even like some of the non-milling parks like Blackpool Pleasure Beach, Portland's Park, Drayton Manor, Flamingo Land, or basically a lot of the major theme parks in the UK will have felt like, oh, a lot of the crowds are going to this brand new, shiny new theme park in Kent, and we need to do something to get the crowds back here. And now obviously when you plan to build a brand new attraction, a really good way to market a brand new attraction was by its stats, so like how tall it is, how fast it is, how steep the drop in it is. And obviously Thorpe Park are using this to their advantage with Hyperia right now. Literally most of the stuff they're saying about it is that it's the UK's tallest and fastest roller coaster, and that is going to be such a huge selling point when the ride opens. Obviously it's not like they're saying that they're going to add like a theme or theming to it. Obviously it does look like it's going to have like a certain sort of like celestial sort of like angelic theme. But the main selling point that Thorpe Park are using is that it's the tallest and fastest coaster in the UK, and that on its own is going to pull a lot of crowds into Thorpe Park next season. And it's not just Thorpe Park that are doing this with Hyperia either. Obviously we all know when the big one opened at Blackpool Pleasure Beach originally, Blackpool Pleasure Beach had even more of an advantage because they could market it as the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster, because it was at the time. Even though it's only 213 foot tall and goes 74 miles an hour, that was the world's tallest and fastest coaster at the time in 1994. So obviously, this is just gonna, like, when Hyperia opens, a lot of the crowds will be going to Thorpe Park, and other parks will probably be thinking, right, they've built this huge roller coaster. What can we do to pull those kind of crowds into our park through our gates, buying admission tickets, and getting on a brand new attraction? Now, obviously, there are quite a number of parks that probably won't do this. Alton Towers, they can't build above the tree height. Chessington, Paulton's Park, Drayton Manor are all family theme parks. Lightwater Valley is a children's theme park now. Blackpool Pleasure Beach probably don't have enough space to build another ride of this scale. Thorpe Park are literally just getting Hyperia right now. Their next coaster after it might not be a hyper coaster. I think the only sort of like major theme park I can probably think of that could get a hyper coaster, and that's if they would be willing to make a large investment like this again, is Flamingo Land. I'm not sure if they would, but I think the only thing being, they did open Sick last year, and that was a huge success for them. Plus, I'm thinking if you're saying that the Flamingo Land might not have enough space to build a hypercoaster, they probably do. They might build like a compact one like Hyperia, because obviously, as we all know, Flamingo Land is located basically in the middle of nowhere in the countryside in North Yorkshire. I don't think the land is really an issue at Flamingo Land, but obviously it's whether they'll be willing to pay such a high price tag for a large new roller coaster. Obviously we know that they paid £20 million to build Sick, and that was just a relocator coaster. But it's whether they would be willing to make a large investment like that again. That's the question. But there's nothing saying that, like, I don't know, Thorpe Park might not add another hypercoaster. Obviously if they did, they'd have 3 coasters over 200 feet, which is pretty mental. But if they did, I could easily see them building like a long, like sprawling out and back layout in this area at the back of the park behind Nemesis Inferno. That's a perfect space for more of like a traditional, like, I don't know, like a B&M hypercoaster with like an out and back style layout. That would be perfect for a ride like that. Obviously if they did, their skyline would be even more different than it's going to be next year, with Hyperia dominating over the sort of like left side of the park, like dwarfing Sword of Ride and Colossus. Obviously we know that Alton Towers, the UK's biggest theme park, they can't build above the tree line. The tallest coaster they've built is the Smiler at 72 feet. That's probably the highest they can build in terms of like track height, because obviously that's about as high as the trees. But I think it may be something like, I don't know, Flamingo Land or Thorpe Park, or if Blackpool Pleasure Beach somehow do, like if they get rid of an attraction, like, I don't know, probably Steeplechase or something, they might want to take the record back and build another new roller coaster that's taller than Hyperia. But who knows, this is going to be like the start of like the UK coaster wars again, possibly. I mean, it could be, we don't know, we'll have to find out. So I want to thank you all very much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it then please make sure to like and subscribe, and comment what you would like to see in the next video. Bye.